The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.
We need a revolution. There's only one solution. I need somebody to show me love. We need a revolution.
Hello and welcome to episode 381 of Informed Life Radio, airing on 1150 AM KKNW Seattle and streaming on CHD TV, Rumble, YouTube, and Facebook. And you can also catch the replay on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Lisa Templeton. Today, we're going to take a look at what communities can do when a massive data center is proposed, especially when an outright ban is unlikely to hold up, and how residents can advocate for strong rules that protect water, power, privacy, property, and household budgets before approval is granted. This hour of Free Speech Radio is brought to you by the nonprofit Informed Choice Washington. And only a small percentage of our subscribers currently help fund this show and our medical freedom work here in Washington State. If even 10% chose to contribute, it would greatly expand what we're able to do. Please consider supporting us at informedchoicewa.org. And to keep in touch with us and receive our cost-free weekly updates, subscribe to informedchoicewa.substack.com. Then interact with us there. Like, share, and comment so the algorithm will bring our posts to more people. The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of KKNW or CHD TV, and the information provided is not intended to be medical or legal advice. I would like to now bring on our fabulous guest, Sam Romain. He is the chairman of Americans for Energy Dominance and a national commentator on energy policy, grid reliability, and AI infrastructure. He's also a partner in the digital agency Romain and has worked in political strategy and grassroots organizing. Our kind of guy. He's appeared on Fox News, the BBC, Washington Examiner, and other outlets. Welcome, Sam Romain, to Informed Life Radio.
Well, thank you for having me. It's my thanks to you and the Informed Choice Washington for the invitation. I'm calling in today from good old Polk County, Florida. And first thing I want you guys to all know is why is a Florida guy talking about Washington? And I will share, we just went through this exact fight with both a hyperscale data center of serious size and also a smaller hyperscale data center. One fight we were successful on, and the other fight we are still working on. So I've done my homework before I came on the show, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Well, do you want to let listeners know what is going on in Washington that does parallel what you have and are going through in Polk County, Florida?
Yeah, I think, before I get too far into it, we just want to say, generally speaking, that data centers are coming into every state all at the same exact time. And so it's making it incredibly hard to organize around in a meaningful way, because it happens so fast. They have a lot of resources, a lot of funding. And so just kind of getting the message out there on what we can and can't do, generally speaking, to have a successful fight in this space, I think is really important, especially when it comes down to local county and city jurisdictions. Every state's different, so I don't know all the details of Florida, of Washington's rules, but there are a lot of similarities. So, okay. I've been in this energy space for about 3 years now, specifically. On the sign-on, you mentioned I had an agency called Romain. I don't really work in that too much anymore. I'm pretty much full-time now in doing energy advocacy, broadly speaking. And because of energy has a lot of overlap with AI policy, data center policy. So I wouldn't say I'm a advocate for AI or data centers, but just how as they relate to the energy space more fairly.
Okay. And so, what are the parallels you see between Washington and the Florida issues you've been advocating on lately, the Florida projects?
Yeah, I think most communities have a lot of the same concerns right now. Is who's coming into my town, right? Like, who's the end user of these data centers? Who's actually going to be operating it? Because a lot of these development deals are kind of shrouded in NDAs. Like, is it going to be Facebook? Is it going to be TikTok? Is it going to be flock cameras? Nobody actually knows in most scenarios. You look at a place like Loudoun County, Virginia, and there was a study that was done. They looked at 35 data center deals that were done. 28 of them, I think 28 had NDAs wrapped up in them. And so people don't know who's coming.
For non-disclosure agreements where the
correct, yeah,
where the government's dealing or just parties' dealings are that both parties agree not to discuss it outside of their contractual relationship.
Correct. And so a lot of times there's confusion on that. So when I go to like city commission meetings or county commission meetings, a lot of people think that the NDAs are actually with the commissioners. And most of the time, they're not actually with the commissioners. It's usually between the developer and the end user. And so the developer's coming in saying, oh, we're building this facility. They don't have to say what it is. They don't have to say for who it is. So that gives a lot of concern around who's actually coming into our towns, especially with the big flock camera thing going on. People don't want to support that in their communities. But beyond just like the transparency issue, there's a lot of concerns around just massive tax breaks, also known as subsidies, right? And so should we be subsidizing trillion-dollar tech companies? Should we be subsidizing Sam Altman and Jeff Bezos and whatever other tech company comes up? The issue of water. I don't know your state's water situation, but down here in Florida, we have a very sensitive aquifer. You'd think that being surrounded by water in Florida, we'd have plenty of it, but we actually don't. We're actually a very dry state, relatively speaking, and the aquifer is very prone to damage because that being a swamp type state, you have these different recharge points, and there's only so much water in the aquifer, right? And so when you have a data center looking to draw 5 million gallons a day or whatever that number may be, that's concerning to people. You also have concerns on closed loop cooling systems and what that actually means and the forever chemicals that could be in that and how do they flush those systems. But where I spend most of my time is in the energy space. And so when a data center comes in to a community, they are a massive user of electricity. And I don't think that the energy piece of this equation is well understood, mainly because energy policy in the United States of America is very complex and very nuanced and also very different in every single state. You have some states where you have like PJM runs the entire Northeast. You have a state like Texas where they have their own grid operator, or you have a state like Florida where you have investor-owned utilities and municipal-owned utilities, and there's just different structures. And so people don't truly understand who pays for what, how's it getting built, where is it getting built, am I paying for it through my utility bill? And then you hear from Washington, D.C., the whole ratepayer protection pledge, but what does that actually mean? So like, when I think about a hyperscale data center, the most recent one, the most personal one to me is the 1.2 gigawatt data center that is attempting to go into Fort Meade, Florida. And what 1.2 gigawatt means, because doesn't mean much to the regular people for the most part, is it's basically 1 million homes. This one building, this one data center would have the equivalent draw as 1 million homes. Which is enormous.
On an ongoing basis.
Yeah, they run 24/7. They don't turn off. Where, at my house, we might have a peak usage during the 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock hour in the afternoon when the kids are here and the lights are on and things are going on. But at night, when all the lights are off, my demand goes down. Data centers do not stop. So how are we powering this? How are we paying for it? Those are some of the big questions kind of that we're having to address all over the country right now.
Okay, what's the difference between megawatts and megawatt hours? What I wrote down is megawatts measure the rate of power use and megawatt hours measures the consumption over time. Can you make that easier to understand?
It's a very nuanced thing. It's kind of complicated. Megawatt hours is like how much you ended up using. So like if you look at your utility bill, it'll tell you that you used 1,500 kilowatt hours, which is like the actual measurement of power. And a kilowatt or a megawatt or a gigawatt is actually like the actual unit of power. It's complicated, but when we're measuring data centers, we're usually measuring them in actual power needed, not necessarily in their total usage, right? So 1 kilowatt, then you have 1,000 kilowatts equals 1 megawatt. 1,000 megawatts equals 1 gigawatt. So on average in the United States of America, across all states, the average home uses around 800 to 900 kilowatt hours, which is a really small draw on a home, right? In Florida, it's a little higher. So it's always so hot and humid down here. You're looking maybe 1,200 kilowatt hours.
Would that be over a month?
Over a month, yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, and so the demand is relatively small for a home, a regular home, right? So these data centers are a whole different thing. I mean, you're talking 1.2 gigawatts of power on constant demand. I mean, you'd end up probably being in the terawatt hours of power in a year. I don't even know what it would measure out to be, but it's insane amounts of power.
Mm-hmm. And so that makes people wonder, is there going to be enough power to go around? And obviously with the demand so much higher, even assuming there is enough power, you got to believe the prices will rise for electricity and generating plants and the substations and transmission lines that would probably be needed to serve the new data centers.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at so this is where utility policy gets really fun, right? So the way that utility companies make money is through typically what they have a guaranteed return on equity. So what that means is they're not a performance-based operation. They are paid based on how much money they get to spend. So think about if a data center moves into your town and the utility company has an obligation, which they do, to service homes and businesses, right? They now have to figure out how are they going to power that business, that data center, which is a business, right? And so when they go and build the transmission lines, the substations, the generation facility, they're going to spend that capital. And the way that they're going to make their money back is by increasing your rates through your Public Service Commission. And that's ultimately how that happens. So your rates don't just go up because they want to make a new price. They have to justify that. And the way they justify it is through new capital expenditures. And so, look, if you take when the utility builds the plant, the substation, the lines, they get the guaranteed return on equity, right? And everything it builds around it. These costs end up getting spread across everyone's utility bill. So if you look at like the big Eastern grid, PJM, which is a grid operator in the Eastern United States, that market has their own independent watchdog group, which has pinned, I think it's around $6.3 billion of the latest capacity auction to data center demand, which is a 38% of the entire auction. And it ends up being about $29 billion across the last 4 auctions they had. So to say that data centers are driving up utility costs is a fair statement, which is why you saw, President Trump had this ratepayer protection pledge, which is these big tech companies coming out and saying, look, we're going to pay our own way. We're going to pay for our own generation. We're going to pay for whatever it may be. The real question comes down to how are we going to actually make that happen in an actual policy perspective, which gets way more nuanced. You look at a state like Florida, for example. We just passed a bill. Governor DeSantis signed it into law just a few months ago called SB 484. And that basically did the same thing, but actually kind of gave some actual policy about how they're going to do it with their large load tariff and whatever it may be. But what we're trying to avoid, and what we should all be trying to avoid, is making sure that regular people, regular everyday Americans, everyday ratepayers. If you pay a utility bill, you're called a ratepayer. We're trying to make sure that ratepayers are not subsidizing big tech. It's not fair. It's not a fair outcome, especially when you're dealing with billion-dollar, trillion-dollar companies. Look, it's my opinion, and there's also some legal precedent that we may not be able to stop data centers the way that a lot of people want to ban them, right? And so the question then becomes, okay, look, if we can't stop them, what can we do to slow them, discourage them from coming to your town? And if they are going to come, make sure that not only are we not subsidizing them, but that they're actually adding community benefit, right? Why should we want them in our town? And that could come in the form of maybe reduce property taxes, maybe a $0 utility bill. Maybe they put solar and a battery on your home so you don't have to worry about it. Whatever that benefit is, it shouldn't just be we get to come into your town and we're going to build a power plant for ourselves and you have to deal with the consequences, because there's still tertiary effects to that, right? There's still water usage, there's still light pollution, there's still noise pollution. And so if it's just a wash at the end of the day, that's still not a fair deal. And so that's kind of what we're advocating for in the different coalitions I'm a part of. My focus is on the energy piece, but look, it's a lot of different groups out there advocating on this topic ultimately want to make sure that we as Americans are not getting a bad deal.
Yeah, that's a lot. And like you say, it's very complicated. Hard for it's another rabbit hole for the average person to go down. One thing that does encourage me is that it seems that people from all political persuasions and all different walks of life are uniting on this issue and pushing back. What's the most successful approaches you've seen people use to, you say that banning is probably not going to be likely, so to mitigate the negative effects and to some of these things you've suggested, like lower property taxes or zero utility bills?
Yeah, I mean, look, let's go towards why I don't think that we can ban these. And every state's a little different, but if we look at the argument of banning a data center, right? You have to contend with the U.S. Constitution, which has the Commerce Clause in it, which allows legitimate businesses to operate, right? And so if we believe in the Constitution of this nation, we have to figure out how to work within that framework. You also, in most states, have a state constitution. So I'll just reference Florida again, because I know it really well. In Florida, we have a state constitution that is deeply protective of private property rights. And so now you have the U.S. Constitution, which has the Commerce Clause, the state constitution, which has deep property rights protections. But then most states also have a variety of laws that were passed in just normal legislative process that also kind of restrict the cities and the counties to just ban businesses and imagine you're telling a property owner, a person who owns a plot of land, you cannot use this land for that business because I don't like that business. Well, someone's opinion on whether they like a business or not like a business does not necessarily give government the ability to ban them outright, especially in a permanent fashion. And so what is happening across the country and even across many states is moratoriums. Now, a moratorium and a ban are effectively the same thing, but with one very different nuance, and that is moratoriums are usually temporary in nature. And so to pass a moratorium that is temporary in nature for justifiable reasons like developing land use codes, trying to do studies on water and electricity or noise pollution, light pollution, to give your community time to actually figure out how they want to coexist with this business, that is justifiable. And in most states, the local authority, you call home rule, has the ability to do temporary moratoriums. Or even like in New York, you saw an actual statewide moratorium. Just recently in Texas, your Governor Abbott kind of did a moratorium without calling it a moratorium. They're putting a pause on new data center developments while they figure out their interconnection queue. And so you can pump the brakes on this as long as you have a justifiable reason to do so. Now, I want to be very precise here, and I go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I just want to chime in that Seattle, the city of Seattle, has recently put a 1-year moratorium on, I'm not exactly sure if it's new ones, if they even have any, and there's a possibility for a 6-month extension on that. But of course, pending studies, as I think you're going to say. And I'm thankful that you backed us up a little bit to get to why you can't outright ban them. So yes, sir, go right ahead.
Yeah, and it's challenging. And so when I go to these different meetings, the most common thing that you'll see is people who are very passionate about this topic. They get to the podium and they say, ban them, we don't want them, we'll never want them. And when we start to speak that way as advocates, it actually ends up doing more harm than good, because those elected officials, those commissioners, they know that they can't. And so what you're doing is you're taking your 3 minutes, your 5 minutes, whatever you get on that podium, and essentially you're wasting it. What they need to hear from you is what you're concerned about actually, and give them the air support, right, to actually take that pause. And so, but I want to be very clear, and I mentioned this on the national call that you had, I think a month and a half ago. I am typically not a moratorium person. I'm not necessarily anti-pause. I tend to be very pro-business. Now, that being said, I advocated very strongly here in where I live in Lakeland for a 12-month data center moratorium. And that just went through a couple of days ago. And that's because I don't look at moratorium as a pause, because I personally am a huge advocate for commerce and private property rights. And so I don't want to be shutting down businesses just because I don't like them, but I do want to make sure we do it the right way so there's not a negative impact on the community. And so this is where having that pause is a tool. A permanent ban becomes a surrender. A ban ends up throwing away all of your leverage, because the fast electric hookup and the tax treatment these companies want are actually worth real money. And so rules on how you trade that real money for protections for your community is the leverage. And so because they want this deal done, if they think that there's going to be a pause, they're willing to put more into your community for it. So there's more community benefit to be achieved, whether that's in green spaces or stronger light pollution mitigation or noise pollution mitigation, you name it, whatever issue your community is focused on, you can do more with that moratorium than you can with just an outright ban.
So use it as leverage in negotiations. This municipality 100%. Could. Okay.
100%. Yeah, this absolutely needs to move to a pay-to-play model for the data centers, paying the community that they're going into. The host community should see a benefit, and that is the biggest problems in the very early phase of. I mean, keep in mind this whole data center conversation. We weren't having this conversation 6 months ago, right?
Yeah.
Like if you were on the cutting edge of it. And so when I look back 6 months ago, when we were in Fort Meade, Florida, one of the first hyperscale data center to ever come to Florida. They didn't even know what they could ask for. That city commission did not even know they could ask for anything. And so they basically gave away the farm, and the data center developer came in and said, look, well, we're going to do something really nice for you guys. We're going to give you a $10 million loan so that you can improve the water infrastructure that services our building. Like, that's not a deal. That's not a benefit. Like, right. You should be doing that. They should be paying for that anyways, not on a loan, but they should just be paying for that. They need the water infrastructure. If they didn't exist, that community wouldn't need to improve the water infrastructure. And so they bundled it up in this whole thing. And the city commission, I'm not faulting them, because I'm not expecting your city commission in a town of 2,000 people to understand energy policy and data center policy. These guys volunteered their time to be elected officials for a $20,000 a year job. I'm not like faulting them for this. They don't know all the nuances, and it was so early. Now we're learning that these $1 trillion companies, they're willing to pay. And so if we can get a benefit out of them that solves our concerns and benefits the communities, I think we can achieve everything that the pro-business people are seeking, the pro-data center people are seeking, and the environmental people are seeking. You can create a win-win-win scenario here if you play your cards right. And look, there are going to be some communities and some people who are out there who are advocating and just say, we don't want them, period. And that's fine. Everyone has their right to speak up on that issue. I caution people because I don't think personally that we can ban them given some of the nuance to our legal structure in the United States. And so if we can't ban them, let's extract the maximum amount of value that we can for our community or what our cause is.
So how do you think, I'm just not certain we can have a win-win-win situation for all the stakeholders, especially considering environmental issues that may not be reversible.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I totally get it. As I advocate, I come across a lot of different advocacy groups in these coalitions, and where I fall back to, and I don't want this to sound like I'm just giving up or throwing in the towel, but what I come back to is that if we believe through our understanding of the law that this business, this data center cannot be stopped, then what deal are we willing to make so that we can be the most comfortable that we can be given the cards that we are dealt? And so, look, if you're advocating for water or EMF or noise or light or whatever it may be, we can make through putting public pressure on the developer, our issues being known and what we're seeking to resolve out of it, we can get them to solve these issues. Now, one of the greatest things about American politics and the way our system works is that through public pushback and public pressure, public comment, and the people pushing back on things they don't like, you start to see companies innovate rather rapidly because they're seeing dollar signs. Right. And I'm not faulting them. We live in a capitalist nation. I want our company great success. I truly mean that. And so when they're getting pushback on that, I think we froze again. Are we good? Okay, we're back. When they're getting pushback on what they're wanting to accomplish, you will see them come to the table to try and come to resolution. So I don't think it's going to be easy to get a win-win-win, but I do think that as people become more aware of what asks they can make, I think you will start to see that happen.
Okay. Hey, backing up a little bit, what's a hyperscale data center?
Yeah, so it's very much undefined, and I was looking at this exact question earlier. So in most states, a hyperscale data center ends up being classified as anything more than 50 megawatts of power. So a hyperscale means that it's a campus scale of large cloud enterprises. So buildings, I mean, hyperscale is when you think of like a really large building so long the technicians actually drive golf carts inside them to get across from each other. Okay. There was one proposed, I'm going to butcher the name, in Wallula, is that right? Wallula
right.
Gap.
Which is in Walla Walla County or something.
Yeah, it is 16 buildings, okay? That is more than 3.5 million square feet, roughly 60 football fields under one roof. Now, the power, Seattle just drew a regulatory line actually at 20 megavolt amperes, which is an engineering unit, which is a close cousin of megawatts. And the council pegged that at roughly 16,000 homes worth of demand. So that is what Seattle is saying is a hyperscale data center, is a 16,000 homes worth of power. You scale that up, 50 megawatts is on the order of 40,000 homes. So in Florida, they call it 50 megawatts. That's 40,000 homes. A gigawatt is 1,000 megawatts, going back to earlier, right? And so a gigawatt is close to 1 million homes. It is not just a building anymore. You are now talking a major city's worth of demand landing on your county's poles and wires and substations. And we talked about this earlier, unlike a home, unlike a city, it runs flat out around the clock. It doesn't turn off. And so it's a heavy load. Hyperscale data centers are a heavy load. We've had data centers in this country for a long time. I mean, your phone works, Facebook works, all these devices work. The call that we're on right now is running through a data center. The difference is our hyperscale data centers. This is the thing that people are mostly worried about. Data centers, there are data centers that are 2 megawatts, 3 megawatts. You never see them, you never hear them. There's no noise pollution, light pollution. They fit in a shoebox or a small warehouse, right?
Okay.
Hyperscale data centers are a whole different beast. You're talking, like I said, 60 football fields is the one nearby you.
Wow.
It's insane, the scale of them.
So what are these for, purportedly? Why do we need so much more, especially given that they've already been around a while?
Yeah, I mean, look, this comes down to AI, right? The AI boom is real. It is here. It is happening. Everyone, shouldn't say everyone, but a lot of people are using AI every single day, whether it comes to research, their Google search, which is now powered by AI, making cute graphics for shows. I mean, some of the radio shows I go on use AI to make the show title card, right? These tools that we're all using are powered by these data centers. And so it's here. AI is here. And when we take a step back objectively, we are racing. Every company on Earth, not just in our country, but on Earth, is racing to build computing capacity. And forecasters have data centers headed towards something like 1/5 of the nation's electricity usage by 2035. Now, some of that demand is real. Some of it is a land rush and like speculative projects who end up reserving power they never actually even use. You'll hear oftentimes that we're in an AI arms race with China. That is true. We are in an AI arms race with China. Now, the details of that could be debated greatly. I think we have something like 12 times more data centers than China does. And I will say we are beating China in the AI arms race. It is a real thing. But does that arms race mean that we need to just surrender everything to these companies? No. These are trillion-dollar companies that can certainly pay their own way. They can solve these problems of energy, of water, of noise and light pollution, you name it. They have the money, they have the resource. What they don't have is the desire, because no one's telling them they have to. And so we need to create that desire for them to solve these problems. And look, I believe in American ingenuity and greatness. When you look at the history of this country and the things that we as a nation, as a people, have been able to invent and develop and design. Some of the greatest technologies in the world have come out of the last 250 years of our nation. And so I believe that all of the problems that we have concerns about, except for maybe privacy, all of the other issues, I think can be solved through innovation. But there has to be enough public pushback to make it hard for this company to do what they're trying to do so that they do innovate. This public comment creates innovation, and I think that's a healthy conversation to have.
Okay. I want to ask you in a minute about public comment, but you brought up kind of the most chilling, well, one of the most chilling aspects of this for me, and that is the privacy, the surveillance, the crime prediction capabilities that are supposedly
flock cameras
rolled out. Yeah, flocks and axon. Yeah. Real-time surveillance. It's not just like, back on Law and Order when they'd say, run the tapes, go pull the closed circuit TV tapes. We'll rewind now that we've got a suspect and see what happened. Instead, it's preemptive and ubiquitous. And all these this mesh that's kind of forming that sort of knows your whole day.
It ends up being like a Chinese surveillance state.
Yes. So what are your thoughts on that? Do you see that as a concern? I mean, I know you're the guru.
Listen, it's not a topic where I advocate, mainly because I don't understand the policy that goes into it, because my lane is really just hyper focused on energy. What I can tell you personally is that I have grave concerns over these cameras, these flat cameras, or other license plate readers that can also figure out where you are. I am a believer in our Constitution, which is why I struggle with this data center conversation, right? So if I believe in the Constitution to the point where I believe the Commerce Clause should be held sacred, I also believe in our Constitution that you have the Fourth Amendment right, which is warrantless search and seizure. And so do I believe that flat cameras have the potential to help crime? 100%. I think it's been proven at this point that they can help reduce crime or solve crime. But do I believe that anyone should be able to log into whatever database and just type in your name and see all your movements? Absolutely not. So I am generally speaking, personally against these cameras. And now, if we're going to have them, I do think that the Fourth Amendment right needs to be protected at all costs. And so, if you have a reason to do a search, get a warrant to pull the information, and then pull the information. The problem also, and this is where even flat cameras gets incredibly nuanced, is that a lot of these cameras end up going onto private property. And so, how do we justify telling a private property owner what you can and cannot do with your own property, right? It gets to be, and this is where policy gets really fun, just in general, is like, it's never black and white. All policy is very, very nuanced. And so if your county government, your city government or police department is putting them on city streets, I think you absolutely should advocate for that. Now, if your local Home Depot, no, like advocate your position against them, okay. Right? Now, if your local Home Depot or Ace Hardware store is putting one in their parking lot, do you as a citizen have the constitutional authority to tell a private business and private property owner that they can't do a camera? And see, that's where it gets weird, right? Yeah. I certainly don't want a surveillance state. Absolutely not. But where do we draw the line on what is constitutional, what is not constitutional? And so it's a hard conversation, and I'm very grateful I don't actually work in that space because I think it would be a very difficult fight.
Yeah, definitely difficult. How do you propose people get together and, present these concerns to their municipalities? Is municipality the best place to start? There's another question, as opposed to maybe more of a state level.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think the best place would be through the federal government for some things. But what you've been seeing is them actually saying, "Oh, it's coming," and then nothing actually happens. So then I think it comes down to the state to make good decisions, and then sometimes you're local. Now, the reason that is because you have so many different jurisdictions, like on the data center conversation. If you are looking to create guardrails or even a statewide moratorium, for example, you might have a city commission who doesn't like that, right? And so the state can end up preempting some of these cities a little bit by creating a framework that these cities have to operate within. And I think you're seeing that happen in most of the states across the country right now, because they've been waiting for federal guidance on how this should work, but nothing has come. And so what you're seeing is a lot of states are giving the authority to their cities to decide if they want to do a moratorium, a ban, whatever. That's good. We need that ability to do that as long as it's legal. But secondly, the states are putting in guardrails that say no draw on the grid, or if there is, you're going to pay for it. No draw on the aquifer, no noise pollution, no light pollution, closed loop cooling, no. And as long as you can meet these, now it's up to the city to do the zoning. But I think that you should have state level guardrails. What would be really helpful is if we did see some federal guidance on how data centers should be operating. But if they're not going to, then the states have to take up that mantle and create the guardrails. They have to. And so you're seeing that in a lot of these governor campaigns taking place across the country right now. You're seeing kind of two main different messaging. One is like, I'm going to ban them at all costs, whatever I can do. And the only way that they're able to do that is actually pass a statewide preemption, and then, which would be a monumental task of its own, and then also legislatively push through that moratorium at the same time, which is extremely difficult and probably short term in nature as well. And then the other conversation you're hearing a lot of, Vivek Ramaswamy out of Ohio just published something today. Governor Abbott in Texas just did something on this on a couple days ago, 3 days ago, where they're putting up guardrails and they're saying, look, we're not going to stop you. As they're both Republican candidates. So as Republicans, we believe in commerce, we believe in business and private property rights. We believe in these things. However, you can't be at the detriment of the people. And that is a very fair statement. So the state should be putting guardrails in place, 100%. And if you are in a state that has not done that, we should be advocating at your state capitals. Absolutely. Advocate at the state capitals. Make sure that they're paying full freight, no tax breaks, no NDAs, no noise pollution, no light pollution, no draw on the aquifer, and some kind of community benefit. That's the biggest thing is, look, we can have all these things of no pollution and no draw, but still we need to see some sort of community benefit come out of this, whatever that may be. It could be lower property taxes. It could be putting, look, in my opinion, because I'm an energy guy, I would love for a data center developer to come in and say, everybody in my impact zone, whatever that is, we're gonna give you the ability to put a battery on your home, a backup battery on your home, which would actually help offset their power usage, and they could pay for that for pennies on the dollar. But there has to be some benefit to the community. Whatever that benefit is, figure it out in your community, make your ask to these developers and fight for it. They have the money to do it.
Okay, that's a good point. They have the money. What do you suggest? Okay, I want to ask you about this. What's it called where they recirculate the water?
Closed loop. Yeah.
So wouldn't that be a no-brainer, or are there dangerous chemicals involved in that? Or
yeah, so closed loop is the first thing to know. Closed loop is a marketing phase. It's not really a defined term. A loop can be closed at the chiller and still reject its heat through evaporation. And a lot of these systems are hybrid that switch to water-assisted cooling on hot days, which is exactly when the aquifer and the grid are both already stressed. The flip side matters too, though. If you want to do dry cooling, which truly uses no water, you end up trading water for electricity, right? And so the follow-up questions end up writing themselves. Is the closed loop system through final heat rejection or only at the chiller? What is the annual makeup of water and peak day draw usage on a heat wave? And if it's air cooled, how many extra megawatts does that choice of cooling actually take, and who pays for that? If the developer or the operator can't answer those questions, then I don't think they're being genuine. Now, your question was about for chemicals in those closed loop systems, and typically, yes, there will be chemicals in those systems. Also, keep in mind, like your vehicle, you have a radiator, right? It's a closed loop system. Now, you still have to flush it, right?
right.
And so when you flush your radiator and that antifreeze is now dumped out of your vehicle, where does it go? Now, on your car, it is, I don't know, a gallon of antifreeze, right? When you're talking about a 4.5 million square foot, 1.2 gigawatt data center, how many millions of gallons of antifreeze? I'm just going to use antifreeze. It's not a scientific term. I don't know what actual chemicals they're using. They're all different. We'll just call it antifreeze for the sake of the conversation. How much of it is there, and where is it going, and how is it being stored? And are we putting that right back into our groundwater? All very concerning. Now, I will say this, and because of this water conversation, you have seen these companies develop newer chips that are able to run hotter and use less water. And so this goes back to what I was saying earlier, is that public pushback creates innovation. And so you're having data centers that we're saying we need 5 million gallons of water a day. That's untenable for most places in this country. Okay, it's not an actual solution. And now you're seeing them bring that number back a lot because the newest generation of chips just don't require the same amount of water. And so this is where I think that the data center companies are mad about the public pushback because it's slowing down their projects, if not killing some of their projects. I think it's a good thing. And I'm some might even call me a tech guy. I don't brand myself that way, but I think it's a good thing that people are pushing back because it's going to force them to make a better product. We need to get to the point where this product is not harming its community. And so, yeah, I mean, 100,000 gallons of antifreeze leaking into the groundwater does not sound like a good idea, but it's everything's a trade-off. This is the nuance of policy. Everything's a trade-off. And so if you don't want high water usage, you have to go to a closed loop system. If you don't want forever chemicals, you have to go to a dry cooling, which then requires more water, which then ultimately requires more construction, more generation, which also requires more water, right? Everything is a consumptive. And so we have to have these honest conversations about how this is going to work. Good question.
Yeah, it's overwhelming. Do you think I've heard a little bit of talk of the possibility there might be an AI bubble that we're building up all of this and it may eventually just collapse, at least partially. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I alluded to this earlier in the conversation where the demand for the data centers is real, partially, and a lot of it is speculative, right?
Yeah.
And so some developers are doing assemblage, which is like collecting all the different plots of land and making their plans, and they're hoping that they'll be able to find a renter to rent it. Now, if they can't, if you start seeing data centers get developed but never have an actual tenant, that would be a really good sign that we are in a bubble, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're anywhere close to the peak of the AI hype cycle at this time. We've not cracked sentient AIs. We've not cracked humanoid robots, which probably terrify me more than flat cameras. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying.
You're supposed to spray paint the eyes. That's your key to salvation.
Well, listen, if you ask my wife, I think she's even more terrified of humanoid robots than I am. I tend to be a bit more sympathetic on tech than she. But listen, the future is going to be wild. And I don't think most people have even thought of the things that we don't know yet. And it's going to be powered through data centers. And so this is where this conversation has to be hard, has to be had, where we can't just pillage our communities for the sake of getting there the fastest. That's not always the best thing. Sometimes we should go back to the frontier days. But one thing we know for certain is that innovation and progress never stops. And so how do we make sure we don't get taken advantage of in that process? But no, I don't think we're at the peak of that bubble. I do think there will be, I do think the hype cycle will come down and moderate. Most bubbles end up going up real fast, collapsing, rebounding, and then stabilizing. That's kind of how that works out. And so I don't think we're at the peak of the bubble, and we will be eventually, and then it'll drop and normalize. Be where we are now. But I certainly don't want to be a Luddite and opposed to technology, right? I mean, we're using it right now, and 20 years ago this would have never this conversation would have never happened. There are a lot of benefits to technology, but I think my biggest concern ultimately comes down to I want to make sure that people are not being taken advantage of. I want to make sure that the communities that we all love and care about are actually getting benefits out of these deals from these $1 trillion companies. We don't need to subsidize Sam Altman. Okay, we just don't.
Mm-hmm.
And I also want to make sure that my children, my 6-year-old, my 5-year-old, my 6-month-old, and whatever future children I might have a future. And if we're dropping 100,000 gallons of forever chemicals into the groundwater and we're draining our aquifer dry, that's not a future. That's a horrible outcome. And so while I don't think that we can stop these data centers from coming for a variety of reasons, mainly around how our country's built through commerce and private property rights, we can in fact advocate for better outcomes. And we can put pressure on these companies, whatever your issue is, whether it's EMF, whether it's water, whether it's energy, whatever your issue is, we can in fact apply pressure to get the outcome that we're seeking, or at least get to an 80% solution.
Mm-hmm. Let's wrap it up with about a 60-second answer, if you could, Sam, of what should people do now?
I think the most important thing right now is just to pay attention. We're still seeing in many communities these deals trying to slide under the radar. And I'll tell you where this starts. It starts in the zoning process. When a piece of land gets rezoned from light industrial to heavy industrial, that needs to raise a red flag, because once that piece of land is rezoned, you're not stopping it. Okay. And so we need to pay attention early in the process. We need to pay attention to what's going on in our communities, and then organizing rapidly, whether it's making a Signal chat or a Facebook group, whatever it is. Get together with people who may not even share the same concern as you, right? Like I'm not in the health freedom space. I have a lot of friends who are. That is not my lane. I'm the energy guy. And so when we go on stage, they talk about their thing as an expert and they don't dip into my lane. I talk about my thing as an expert and I don't dip into their lane. I can't talk the health issues that they can, but I can talk energy. And so when we go on stage together, everyone takes their piece and we can eat the pie, right? What do they say? How you eat an elephant is one bite at a time, right? That's the same concept here. Find your friends who are in the same fight, but in a different lane, and work together.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sam Romain. People can find you at samromain.com and at Sam Romain at Substack. Appreciate your coming on, sir.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
I'd also like to thank our excellent producer at the station, Nathan Miller, for all his work behind the scenes. He always helps things go so smoothly, more than you will ever know, ladies and gentlemen. And also thanks to you for tuning in, taking your time today on 1150 AM KKNW and CHD TV. This is your host, Lisa Templeton, signing off until next week. And here's to embracing your informed life. Take care, everybody.
Informed Choice Washington is a nonprofit organization that advocates for healthy immunity, medical freedom, and fully informed medical consent. The right to make medical choices without coercion is fundamental to our civil liberties and a basic principle in all human rights declarations. To learn more, tune in each Friday from 4 to 5 p.m. to an Informed Life Radio and visit the website informedchoicewa.org. It's time to take a stand for medical freedom. Go to informedchoicewa.org today.
Did you know that solutions containing iodine can inactivate viruses in the nose and throat in 15 seconds? And hydrogen peroxide can do it in under 30 seconds. Decades of studies, including many conducted during COVID, have shown that properly prepared and used nasal spray and gargling solutions can reduce your risk of infection, reduce viral load, reduce symptoms, and reduce transmission of viruses. To learn more, go to healthyimmunitynow.org and check out the EFU Challenge. Why spread fear and infection when nature provides solutions? Go to healthyimmunitynow.org today.
The information contained in this episode is for informational purposes only. No material is intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment.